Hello, and welcome to another episode of How They See Us. I'm Denise Herd, President of Herd Strategies, and I am your host. And for those of you all that don't know us, How They See Us is a series where we invite industry leaders and friends of Herd Strategies to discuss how they navigate public perception challenges within their fields. And as we were planning out some episodes, we thought about a couple of topics that we felt were really important and that we needed to just have a conversation about. And one of those is the fact that August is Black Business Month. And so as a Black business owner myself, I knew I had to take a moment and dedicate an episode to acknowledge all of the other Black entrepreneurs that are out here in our city, in our state, our nation, just making things happen and building legacies. So, shout out to all of us, all of you. And something I wanted to share also is that as I was doing some research about Black Business Month and just looking at how far we've come, yet how far we do have to go, I ran upon a report that was published by the Brookings Institute. And what the report said was that more so than other racial groups, Black owned businesses had significant or pronounced increases in revenue, in employees, and in payroll. And in 2020, Black business owners employed 1.3 million people and created over 48,000 new jobs, which marked about a 1.7 billion in aggregate payroll within the US economy. That is tremendous. That's tremendous growth, a tremendous amount of revenue and job creation that's being achieved by Black entrepreneurs. We are building economic growth. We are contributing significantly to the economy, and we are positively impacting communities throughout the country. But as we look at the future for Black business owners and we look at our growth, we can't help but turn our attention to the upcoming election, both state and federal. All eyes are focused on our current political climate and the outcome of the November election. Regardless of how things turn out, it's going to have a significant impact on Black business owners, regardless of what side of the aisle you sit on. So that's why I feel it's important to have a conversation about this topic. Being a Black business owner today, in today's political climate, I just know I could not have this conversation by myself because if I did it by myself, it would definitely go off the rails. So that's why I decided to reach out to my colleague and my friend, Carolyn Mosby. Now, for those of you all that don't know Carolyn, I will let you know that she has been advocating for Black business owners throughout her entire career. She's the former president of the Mid States Minority Supplier Development Council, and she also serves as an advisor to the National Minority Supplier Development Council. She has created policies and initiatives that have positively impacted Black and minority business owners, and she's often called upon by corporations to help them craft procurement strategies that will eliminate barriers for Black and minority business owners and create opportunities for growth. So I couldn't think of a better person to have join me for this conversation than Carolyn. So, Carolyn, how are you today?
Hey there, I'm great. How are you?
I am doing really good. So, I said a few things about yourself, but about you, but could you share a little bit more about your background and your experience
Sure,
throughout your career?
absolutely. And I'm not even sure you even know this, but I'm currently the interim president and CEO for the North Central Minority Supplier Development.
Oh, Carolyn,
So,
congratulations.
yeah, I'm just serving in that role for 12 months to help them kind of get ready to go and seek a new permanent president and CEO. So I'm back into the NMSDC network. But yeah, I've been doing this work for over a decade, and actually even started my career out working for the state of Indiana's minority business program. So definitely passionate about
Yeah.
minority business development. And even when I left the council, and started doing consulting, I was working with minority businesses, helping
Mhm.
them from a business development perspective and marketing, and leveraging my background to help them to continue to access opportunities in corporate America.
Awesome. So as you can see, I brought someone who is not only qualified, but capable and passionate about this, about helping Black entrepreneurs. So, Carolyn, thank you so much for joining me today. And I just want to get right down to it because we've got a little bit of time and a lot of things we want to talk about. And so, as I said in my introduction, we are on the precipice of a historical election right now. And I feel like we are starting to experience and witness a similar type of energy that we felt when Barack Obama ran for president. And according to the most recent census, about over 161,000 US businesses are Black owned. And Black owned businesses in the United States generate about 206 billion in annual revenue. And of course, the jobs that we support is absolutely and have created is tremendous. So given these types of numbers and what we're seeing, what sort of topics or priorities should Black business owners be listening for with respect to messaging from our candidates from both sides of the aisles? And this is both at a state level and a federal level.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you have to also, as you said, kind of look at the things that are happening, because the landscape is really changing, and you're seeing a lot of challenges to DE&I programs and affirmative
Mhm,
action and supplier diversity. So in the government, at the federal level, at the state level, and then in private corporations as well. So
mhm,
it's really changing the way that we even look at programs and
mhm,
support for Black-owned businesses and other minority groups as well. And so I think, we have to approach it from an economic impact perspective. It's got to be about economics, and it's
mhm,
got to be
mhm,
about job creation. And so we've got to tell those numbers. We've got to share the information about the economic impact that Black-owned businesses have. And so those are the questions that we have to ask, and listen for them to talk about. What are they doing when it comes to access for capital? What's their thought process? What's their strategy? What's their platform on
mhm,
increasing opportunities for access to capital? And what are we doing to make sure that we're reducing those barriers, and making sure that there's equitable distribution of those resources at the state level and then at the federal level? Because even at the federal level, there was a recent Supreme Court decision that went against the U.S. Department of Commerce's Minority Business Development Agency. So that's the federal arm, that's been working with minority businesses to help give them access to federal contracting. And so that's now changed around. Now, instead of talking about minority owned businesses specifically, although they can still use that terminology, it's
uh-huh.
now about socially and economically disadvantaged individuals.
Which
So
is
we
the
have to
DB,
be
the DBE category
correct. So
that
we're now we got to be
transportation
more
uses.
inclusive. So now
Mhm,
they're
mhm,
creating legislation and creating
mhm.
policy that's saying, hey, no longer can you focus on DE&I and affirmative action, because we're seeing that that's exclusionary practices. And so it really does have to be about economics.
Right.
So we have to really come to the table, and we have to present it in a different way. And we've got to talk about the impact that it has to the economy.
And this is all of us. Like we all have to be responsible for doing our research and having that knowledge because
Absolutely.
I think that we all probably were not paying as close of attention as we should have when we saw the Supreme Court's decision about affirmative action, a while back. I think that
Mhm.
we talked about other social issues that
Right.
their decision was going to unravel. But I think as a business owner, we were probably not paying as close attention as we should have been of
Right.
how that decision could transcend and permeate into our world as
Yeah.
business owners.
Yeah.
And so that thank you for bringing some attention to that. And I would love to get more information about that and use our platforms to spread the word about that because I don't think a lot of business owners are aware of that decision or are in
Mm.
tune of the implications behind that decision as we should be.
Yeah, I mean, and so I mean, even to take it a step further, thir 13 state attorneys generals sent, I guess you could call it a warning to the top Fortune 100 corporations,
Hmm.
warning them against the potential of litigation as it relates to any diversity programs that they might have. So
Hmm.
now they're putting pressure on corporations to step away from their
No.
diversity programs. And so, just as recently as last week, one major corporation announced that they're stepping away from their diversity initiatives. So, I think, you look at it from the business perspective, but you also look at it from the consumer
More
perspective.
expected. Yeah,
Because
exactly.
African Americans, they have what, $1.6 trillion in spending power.
Right.
And
Right.
so, okay, well, if you if that's the case, then we need to look at how we're spending our dollars as
Hmm.
consumers as well, and really leverage again that economic spending power.
So your commentary just now, it actually sets up perfectly the next question that I have, because according to some data provided by the Brookings Institute, Black business growth was trending upward prior to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Mhm.
And, so from like 2017 to 2020, the number of Black owned businesses across the country increased by a little bit over 13%,
Mhm.
which was actually larger than all business growth in general, because that percentage was like at 0.53 within that
Mhm.
same period. And the other thing about that window of time is that Black-owned firms, we generated about 141 billion in gross revenue, which was significant, and was like an 11% increase from 2017.
Mhm.
So going back to what you just talked about, looking at things through an economic lens, looking at the impact to consumers, and also that shift in DEI priorities that you just mentioned, my question to you is, what other challenges do you foresee Black businesses encountering that could potentially slow down or eliminate our growth?
Mm.
And how should we be preparing for that?
So I think, I mean, I think you have to look at the complete landscape. Again, access to capital is going to be consistent across across
Mhm, mhm,
everything. But,
mhm.
just looking at the economy and maybe the uncertainty in the economy, and looking at different supply chain issues and market issues that are going on, and then really looking at diversifying revenue streams as
That's
business.
a good one. Yeah, yeah.
I worked with a client not long ago where I was very concerned that 90% of their revenue came from one customer.
Mhm,
And so I think you really have to look at diversification. I
mhm,
think we
mhm,
probably saw a little bit of that during COVID, right?
mhm,
Because of what
mhm,
happened with COVID and certain businesses scaling back on production
mhm,
affected suppliers because
mhm,
that's where they were getting the majority of their revenue. So
mhm,
definitely diversifying your customer base is very important, and
mhm,
looking for other opportunities, and then any kind of regulatory issues,
mhm,
or things that come up in terms of challenges with changes of regulatory statutes and things like that. uh,
mhm,
Healthcare costs,
mhm,
all those things that affect the way that you operate your business and how you support your employees,
mhm,
availability of the workforce.
mhm,
What does that look like? And then, just with technology, so
mhm,
I think you have to look at all of those different pieces that really go into how you run, operate, and sustain your business, and
mhm,
really pay attention to things that are changing and how
mhm.
those changes are going to affect your ability to produce.
Yeah, it's almost like you have to now is the time for you to do an internal assessment of how you can get ahead of the curve. I always tell business owners, think about how you can Gumby yourself. What
Hmm.
else can you do?
Exactly.
What else, what
Exactly.
other partnerships or collaborations can you identify to help you grow your business and stay in business?
Absolutely.
So everything you said is so spot on. I want to go back and talk a little bit more about some of the findings in this report from the Brookings Institute, because there's just so much good data there. But one
Hmm.
of the things that they talked about is that more so than other racial groups, Black owned businesses, we did have those significant increases in revenue and employees and in payroll. And in 2020, we employed like 1.3 million people and created, over 48,000 jobs. And
Mhm.
then that huge payroll that we had, about 1.7 billion in aggregate payroll. And so these numbers are awesome. They are amazing. I really want us not to focus on how amazing these numbers are, and focus on, are these numbers equitable? Are
Mhm.
they do is this reflective for entrepreneurs regardless of what you look like and the
Mhm.
color of your skin? Because if Black business ownership continues to grow at its current rate that we just talked about, which is like 4.72, it will take us
Right.
256 years
Yeah.
to reach
Yeah.
parity with the share of Black people in America.
Yeah.
The other thing is that, to reach parity in 15 years, we would have to grow at a 74.4% growth rate.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for 25 years, it would be 44.6. And at 50 years, 22.3. So therefore, this is great. Like, and you just talked about, we as Black people want to support Black owned businesses, but we don't have enough Black owned businesses, that's
Right.
reflective of our population percentages. And so I think that's another reason why we have to pay attention to this election and what candidates will say about what they can and will do for Black owned business owners.
Yeah.
So, my question of you is, what should we be asking these candidates?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think one of the questions is what are you going to do, but what have you done, right?
Oh, good
Because
point.
I
Good
think,
point. Your track record.
yeah, what is your track record? Because I
Hmm.
don't think anybody is going to come into this and, you're going to wave a magic wand and they're going to change how they
Hmm.
support or operate, or in terms of the things that they've been doing from an advocacy perspective in their lives as public servants before. So I think that's an indicator before you even ask the question. You kind of already know based
Right, right,
upon
right, right.
their records, but certainly, bringing those points to the forefront, what you just mentioned, and talking about the economic impact and the disparity, and the fact that it would take 200 to 300 years to reach that parity. But I think they have to have a commitment. So the question is, what is your commitment to helping to reduce the wealth gap? And it can't be based on what we've been doing and just doing a little bit more. There has to be
Hmm.
significant change. But then you put that up against, again, the court cases and the recent Supreme Court decisions. So then that creates more of a challenge now, because the corporations and the federal governmental programs are now being restricted by what they can do. So now you've got to start looking at changes in legislation and really educating those people that are running for office, educating Congress and your state
Hmm.
legislators to really understand the value. And
Hmm.
again, go back to the numbers. Yeah.
Yeah, it just, because here's the thing: the numbers don't lie. Now we can make the numbers tell this whatever story it is we want them to tell, but
Hmm.
the numbers are the numbers are the numbers.
Exactly.
I'm a firm believer in
Yeah.
that. That's why one side of me is a bit of a data geek, because you can't get around what the numbers are telling you.
Exactly.
You just can't.
Exactly.
We've got a few minutes left in this conversation, and so I want to shift gears just a little bit, and I want to talk about Black women-owned businesses.
Hmm.
And because that's who I am, so I have to, the real power here. So, though far from equitable, the rate of Black business ownership, or business ownership for Black women, is growing.
Hmm.
It's growing. And in fact, Black women-owned businesses increased by about 181 no, excuse me, by about 18%
Hmm.
between 2017 and 2020, which actually outpaced women-owned businesses across the board, which was at 9%.
Hmm.
And we outpaced Black businesses at 13.6%. So Black women-owned businesses are on the increase. We truly are. And these trends actually parallel small sole proprietor businesses that are owned by Black and Latino or Hispanic women. And so, though the growth rate is a result of structural changes that have eliminated barriers for us. We all remember or hear the stories about how, up until what was it, early in the 1900s or the late when women couldn't apply for business loans unless they had a male signature, which meant if
Okay.
you were divorced or you were a widow and you didn't have a man to sign on that for that bank loan, your son, your child, if he could sign because he was a
Yeah.
male. So, some of those types of antiquated barriers have been, been removed. There's an intentionality to engage women, and we all kind of know the motivation behind that. But conversation for another day. But I would really love to know your thoughts as, women are voters, and we do a lot to mobilize, campaigns, elections, and get people voted. So, what is it that we as women business owners need to be, keeping our finger on the pulse on? Because sometimes we're not really, as Black women, the priority. It's really white women who are
Mhm.
the priority, and we get kind of the residuals because
Right.
of that, because we are women.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I mean, I think women in general, I mean, we're just, we're more innovative, creative. We take charge,
Right.
which works to our advantage, but sometimes can work to our disadvantage as well.
Hmm.
Whereas we're so used to taking charge that it's hard for us to let go.
Hmm.
And so when I think for me, when I look at, and I just had this conversation with two women-owned businesses in the last month, where they were growing steadily, but they've kind of come to a place where they're not growing anymore. So my question was, well, why are you in these meetings, right? Because if you and I mean, I think it goes to any business owner too, because when you start your business, it's your baby, you've grown it, and then
Hmm.
you get to a point where you need to let go of some things in order to really operate more strategically to
Hmm.
grow the business. But you can't grow the business if you're sitting in the meeting, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
so, so really looking strategically at what are the things that you need to put in place in order to continue to let your business grow, and then how do you leverage the resources with other women-owned businesses to be
Mm,
able
mhm,
to come together in some
mhm,
instances,
mhm.
because there's power in partnerships, and
Yeah,
I feel like women-owned businesses are probably more willing to do partnerships than
I agree.
male-owned businesses. And so, how do you
Mhm,
leverage that? Because
mhm,
I think
mhm,
women are in a position to really be able to come to the table more
mhm,
powerful in
mhm,
partnership. And I think
mhm,
again, there's just a
mhm,
bigger willingness to do that. And so, really leveraging those opportunities as partners,
mhm.
but then also looking strategically at what is it going to take for me to continue to grow, and what do I need to let go of, and what am I willing to let go of to really make that happen.
That is so true. You hit on something that had to make me pause and say, yeah, that's true. Most of our partnerships are with other women-owned
Mhm.
businesses. And I have found, because I know collaborations was a strategy that I said I was going to ride from the very start, that I
Mhm.
knew that to achieve the growth that we wanted to achieve, it was going to have to be done through collaborations, that
Yeah.
I really couldn't do it by myself. Plus, there's strength in numbers.
Right.
And so our most of our partnerships, or our most long-standing partnerships,
Mhm.
are with other women-owned businesses.
Mhm.
And that's been really helpful. And they've been mentors, they've been allies, they've been advocates. They've given us opportunities that maybe they couldn't do. They passed them on to us. And
Yeah.
so, and they have been able to position me in rooms where I probably could not have
Mhm.
been invited to enter. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm all for
Yeah.
collaborations. And so I think as women, we do need to come together. Yeah,
Absolutely. I
that's
think one other thing too, and I kind of had an aha moment when I left the council and I was working with this one MBE, and they're very large, like multiple $1 million. And
mhm,
when I got into the company and just started seeing things, I really was like, wow, how are you all this large, right? But then
mhm,
I had to remind myself about their journey. And so a lot
mhm,
of entrepreneurs start their businesses because you have an expertise or a passion. And
Hmm.
you may come out of a corporate environment or another environment having never run a department, having
Yeah.
never had a P&L. And so it's really on the job training while you're building the
Yes.
business, right?
Yes.
Some of the
Yes.
fundamental things
Hmm.
that you probably need to know and have in place aren't there because
Right.
you haven't had that training exposure or
Yeah.
coaching around that. And so
Yeah.
then you get the business grows kind of almost by
In
just
spite of itself. Yeah.
exactly. But then you get to that point where it's like, okay, so now what? And then
Right.
and then a lot of it is because you don't have the foundation. You weren't
Hmm.
able to lay that foundation,
Hmm.
when you started the business because you were so busy trying to do that and you really
Hmm.
didn't understand those foundational things. So then it's about going back and saying, in order for my business to continue to grow, because the growth is only going to take place if I have the right folks in place and I've
Hmm.
set the foundation for them to be able to be successful and
Hmm.
grow the
Hmm.
business because you can't do
Hmm.
it by yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Wild. So we are almost out of time. This went so fast. So we're almost out of time. And so, but I would love to hand it back to you if you don't mind. If there are just any final thoughts or that you have about, that or words of encouragement or even advice for Black business owners as we approach this upcoming election. I would
Yeah.
love to give you a moment to
I would say, be intentional about doing your research and understanding the platforms and looking at past records of
Mhm.
the candidates, asking those questions. But then, in addition to asking the questions, using that data to really back up the reason why.
Mhm.
Right. So, what the reason why you need to support, or the reason why this is important, because it's based upon the data that talks about what we bring to the table as business owners and as consumers. And
Mhm.
so that's my advice, because as you said, the numbers are the numbers and data is real. So
Mhm.
I think
Mhm.
that's important to bring to the table, and just stay involved and stay engaged. And at the end of the day, register people to vote and
Yes, and make sure your voter registration is up to date.
absolutely, and vote. That is the most important thing.
Yes,
And encourage people that that don't vote to vote.
vote. Yes,
At the
because
end of the day, that's the only way that we're going to make a difference.
it is, because we cannot be apathetic. This is a really, really important election. There is a lot at stake for
Absolutely.
a lot of people. So I think it's imperative that we all, get to the polls and get others to the polls.
Absolutely.
Do the early voting, everything that we can to make sure that we make the decisions that are in the best interest of
Mhm.
business owners, of our families, of our children, of the future of our nation.
Yes,
All righty.
absolutely.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you so much for joining
thank
us. I
you.
truly appreciate this conversation.
Absolutely.
All righty. So, thank you. I hope you all enjoyed that. I hope you gained something from it. And like we said, please, please, please make sure you pay attention to these messages, looking at the history, the voting records. You can look up the voting records and the history of candidates by just going to their website or going to the any sort of voter registration websites as well. So please make sure you look up your candidate's history so that you know what they stand for and what they represent. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of How They See Us. I would be remiss if I did not say happy birthday to Herd Strategies, who is turning 13 this year. Yes, we're turning 13 during Black Business Month. How about that? So we're excited about what the future has brought us and excited and so thrilled about the support that we've had over the past 13 years. I just want to say also thank you to the Herd team, to Kiera Santolin and also Malik Harris for their support and for producing today's podcast. And don't forget to subscribe to our How They See Us podcast series, which is available on all streaming platforms. And you can watch us on our official YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and talk soon.